Right now, as you're watching this, a man is sitting in a Spokane County jail cell on a $1 million bond, accused of deliberately starting the wildfire that destroyed 640 homes and forced 67,000 people to run for their lives. And here's the second part, the part that makes this almost hard to believe. While that fire was still burning through neighborhoods, while families were evacuating and crews were fighting to save what they could, the aircraft that drop water and retardant from above were repeatedly forced to stop flying. Not because of weather, not because of smoke, because civilians kept flying drones into the fire zone. At least 26 times. 26 times, someone put a hobby drone into the airspace over a burning city, and every single time, fire officials had no choice but to pull their air tankers and helicopters back, because if one of those drones hits an aircraft, the aircraft comes down. So this is the story of a disaster that, according to authorities, did not have to happen at all, and of the people whose choices, one accused of starting it and others accused of hampering the fight against it, turned a wildfire into a catastrophe. If this kind of deep look at what's really happening behind a disaster is what you come here for, subscribe. Let me walk you through it. Start with what we actually know about the arrest, because the details matter. On Saturday, August 1st, the Old Trails fire broke out on the West Plains, northwest of downtown Spokane. Driven by 35 to 50 mile-per-hour winds and single-digit humidity, it jumped the Spokane River, pushed into the city, and tore through the Indian Trail and 5 Mile Prairie neighborhoods. By the time it was done, it had destroyed 640 structures, the single most destructive of 3 fires burning around the city, which together leveled more than 700 buildings and forced some 67,000 people to evacuate. The mayor called it the worst natural disaster the region has ever faced. Then, 2 days later, the story changed shape. The break came from an ordinary citizen. According to Spokane County Sheriff John Nowles, a community member reported seeing a nervous-looking man crouched by the side of the road, near some grass, in the area where the fire is believed to have started. That tip led authorities to a 37-year-old Spokane man named Arson. They questioned him and, at first, released him. But the investigation continued, and on Monday, August 3rd, the Spokane County Sheriff's Office arrested him and booked him on suspicion of first-degree arson in connection with the Old Trails fire. His bond was set at $1 million. That detail, questioned, released, then rearrested, tells you something about how these cases are built. Arson is one of the hardest crimes to prove because the evidence is, by definition, mostly consumed by the fire itself. Investigators can't usually find a smoking gun. They work backward from the point of origin, looking for burn patterns, ignition sources, witness accounts, and timelines that place a person at the start of the fire. A citizen tip putting a nervous man beside the grass at the ignition point is the kind of thread that starts an arson investigation. But the fact that he was released and then rearrested suggests the sheriff's office spent the intervening time gathering more before they were willing to book him. What that additional evidence is, we don't yet know publicly. First-degree arson is the most serious arson charge there is. It's the charge used when a fire is set in a way that knowingly endangers human life. And a fire that burned through occupied neighborhoods and forced tens of thousands to flee is about as clear an example of endangered life as exists. $1 million bond is the court signaling it considers both the alleged crime and the flight risk extremely serious. Now, here is where I have to hold the line carefully, and I'd ask you to hold it with me. An arrest is not a conviction. A charge is not proof. Arson is accused of starting this fire. He has not been tried, and under the law, he is presumed innocent until that happens. It's entirely possible the case against him is strong. It's also possible it doesn't hold up. That's what courts are for, and we don't have the evidence file. We have an arrest and a charge. What we can say factually is this. Authorities believe the Old Trails fire was not an accident of nature. They believe a person started it, and they've charged someone with doing it. Authorities have not stated a cause for the other 2 fires. So this allegation applies to the Old Trails fire specifically, the biggest one, the one that took the 640 homes. Sit with why that single word, arson, reframes this entire disaster because it's the heart of the story. Up to the moment of that arrest, Spokane was a tragedy, a terrible convergence of drought, wind, and dry fuel, an act of nature that no one could be blamed for, the kind of thing that makes you shake your head at how cruel the weather can be. An arson allegation turns a tragedy into something else. It means that if the accusation is true, every one of those 640 destroyed homes, every one of the 67,000 people who fled, every family sifting through ash for a wedding ring, all of it traces back to a decision a person made, not a lightning strike, not a downed power line, a choice. And that's a different kind of weight. There's a couple, Daniel and Miriam Sim, both in their 70s, who came back Monday to the ruins of the home they'd lived in since 2005. Standing in the wreckage, Miriam said there was nothing left to save. Her husband asked the question that a lot of older residents are asking right now: at our age, do we want to rebuild? If the fire was an act of nature, that's a heartbreaking question with no villain. If the fire was set on purpose, that same question has a person at the end of it. Someone whose alleged choice took a home two people had lived in for 20 years. That's why arson cases land the way they do. It's not just the damage, it's that the damage was allegedly unnecessary, that all of it could simply not have happened. But the accused arsonist is only half of why this fire became as destructive as it did. The other half happened in the sky, and it involves people who almost certainly meant no harm at all. And it raises a question worth holding on to as we go. How much of this 640 home catastrophe was actually preventable, not by nature, but by people? Keep that question in mind, because by the end, the answer is more unsettling than the fire itself. Here's the part of this story that made me genuinely angry when I read it, and I think it'll do the same to you, because it's so avoidable. While the fires were burning at their worst, unauthorized drones flew into the restricted airspace over the Spokane fire zone at least 26 times, and each time it happened, fire officials had to make a brutal call: ground the aircraft. Understand why they have no choice. In a wildfire, the air tankers and helicopters fly low, sometimes just above the treetops, through smoke, at high speed, to drop water and retardant exactly where it's needed. A drone in that airspace is a catastrophe waiting to happen. A collision could bring down a tanker or a helicopter, killing the crew and destroying an aircraft the entire firefight depends on. So the rule is absolute. If there's an unauthorized drone in the fire airspace, every aircraft stops flying until it's gone. Think about what that means in the middle of a fire moving house to house through a city. The air tankers are often the only thing that can slow a fire's advance on a neighborhood the ground crews can't reach in time. Every minute those aircraft are grounded, the fire keeps running with nothing above it to check it. A drone doesn't have to hit anything to cause damage. Its mere presence in the sky is enough to take the single most effective firefighting tool off the board. 26 separate times, over a fire that was destroying homes by the hour. And the grounding isn't instant on, instant off. When a drone is spotted, the aircraft don't just pause for the 60 seconds the drone is visible. They have to divert, sometimes return to base, and wait until officials are confident the airspace is actually clear before it's safe to resume low-level drops. A single drone sighting can cost far more than the moment it's in the air. It can cost the better part of an hour of aerial firefighting while a fire is at its most aggressive. Multiply that by 26, over the exact window when Spokane's neighborhoods were burning, and you begin to grasp how much unchecked fire growth those incursions may have allowed. The people flying those drones almost certainly weren't trying to help the fire. Most drone incursions over wildfires are people wanting footage. Spectators, hobbyists, would-be content creators who want the dramatic shot. But the intention doesn't matter to the outcome. Whether you fly a drone over a fire out of malice or out of curiosity, the result is identical. The planes come down, and the fire wins that window. This is such a persistent, deadly problem that the National Interagency Fire Center runs an entire public campaign around it, with a slogan that says everything in 4 words: if you fly, we can't. Flying a drone in wildfire-restricted airspace is a federal crime, punishable by up to a year in prison, and can carry a civil penalty of $20,000 or more. And in California, fire investigators have arrested hobbyists for exactly this. One man was tracked down after he posted his drone footage of a fire to social media and became the first person that state's fire agency ever arrested for grounding aircraft with a drone. So in Spokane, you have, allegedly, one person accused of starting the fire, and dozens of others whose choices, careless rather than criminal, kept grounding the aircraft trying to put it out. A disaster made worse from two directions at once. Now step back, because both of these problems, arson and drone incursions, are not unique to Spokane, and understanding that is the reason this matters to you wherever you live. Wildfire arson is more common than most people realize. The 2024 Park Fire, the largest California wildfire of that year, which burned more than 429,000 acres and destroyed over 700 structures, was allegedly started when a man pushed a burning car into a dry gully. Investigators trace a meaningful share of destructive wildfires back to human ignition, some accidental, some deliberate. When a landscape is primed to burn, dry fuel, low humidity, wind, it doesn't take much. A single ignition, from a spark or a match or a rolling car, can become a fire that levels a city. That's the terrifying fragility of a Western summer. The difference between a quiet evening and a 640-home catastrophe can be one person's choice, in one dry field, on the wrong day. And the drone problem is exploding everywhere, precisely because drones have become cheap and common. Every major fire now draws them. Every fire agency in the West is fighting the same battle to keep spectators' aircraft out of the sky. The Spokane fires drew at least 26 incursions. California has logged dozens over the past few years. As long as people want the dramatic shot, and as long as a drone costs less than a phone, this will keep happening, and it will keep grounding the planes that neighborhoods depend on. Here's why that reaches you directly. If you live at the edge of a western town, or increasingly a lot of towns across the country, where the last street backs onto dry grass or brush, you live in a place where a single ignition on a windy August day can become an evacuation order for your street. And if that fire comes, the aircraft fighting it can only do their job if the airspace above them is clear. Two things that sound like someone else's problem, an arsonist in a field, a hobbyist with a drone, are actually the two things most likely to turn a fire near you from survivable into catastrophic. There's a simple, concrete way you fit into this, and it's the most useful thing in this video. If you ever see a drone flying over or near a wildfire, call 911. That's the official guidance. You reporting a drone can be the thing that gets the air tankers back in the sky over someone's neighborhood. And it goes without saying, never ever fly one yourself anywhere near a fire. If you fly, we can't, is not a slogan. In Spokane, it was 26 windows in which the fire ran unchecked. Here's where things are as of this recording, and the threads that are still open. The three Spokane fires, Old Trails, Fairview, and Autumn Lane, had burned roughly 16 square miles by early Tuesday and were still, at last report, completely uncontained. More than 1,000 firefighters, many from out of state, had arrived, with that number expected to double. Calmer winds and lower temperatures arrived to give crews a chance, but forecasters warned it was expected to turn hot and dry again by midweek, which could reawaken fires that crews had only just begun to corner. Smoke covered nearly the entire state of Washington and was expected to linger for days. This is being called the Pacific Northwest's worst fire season in more than 30 years. There has still been no confirmed loss of life, which, in a fire that destroyed 700 buildings, remains close to miraculous, and a credit to how fast the evacuations went out. Aaron Farinacci remains in custody on that $1 million bond, and his case will now move through the courts, where the allegation against him will either be proven or it won't. Authorities are still investigating the cause of the other two fires, which means it's possible this story isn't finished, that there's more to learn about how all three of these fires began. And that's really the thread to leave you with. For 2 days, Spokane was a natural disaster, something that happened to a city. Then an arrest turned it into something a person is accused of doing to a city. And running underneath it the whole time, the quieter scandal, aircraft grounded again and again, not by nature, but by people who wanted a better view. The 640 homes are gone either way. The 67,000 people evacuated either way. What the arrest and the drones add is the hardest part to sit with. The growing sense that the worst of this may not have been the weather at all. It may have been us. If this was useful, subscribe and turn notifications on. We track these as they develop, and this one is still developing. Keep the people of Spokane in mind tonight, the families who lost everything, the crews fighting a fire that's still uncontained, and a couple in their 70s deciding whether they have it in them to rebuild. And if you ever see a drone over a fire, call 911. Take care of each other out there.